I think the question demands certain critical answers. And the first question is ZANU-PF ready to talk? And what is ZANU-PF? Who is ZANU-PF? Are there incentives for ZANU-PF to talk? What are the drivers of any dialogue? Has Zimbabwe and the two main parties, the MDC Alliance and ZANU-PF, have we reached a mutually self-hating status quo, which leaves the parties with no choice but to dialogue and talk, which is what we did in 2007 and in 2008 when President Mugabe was still around and President Changirai was still around. This time around, I don't think that ZANU-PF is ready to talk. I think that the biggest challenge and the elephant in the living room is the complete takeover of the Zimbabwean state by the military, the rise of the securocratic state, which since November 2017, you have seen this massive authoritarian consolidation. You have seen massive closure of political spaces in a manner that is unprecedented. The current goings on now of abductions, arrest of journalists, arrest of pastors, of lawyers, no one is safe, is unprecedented. It's almost like you are dealing with a totally deranged elite in ZANU-PF that is controlling the state. But there's something that is happening other than authoritarian consolidation. There's something else that is happening, which is an incentive for the retention of the status quo and a disincentive for change, for transformation, and for dialogue. This thing is the massive looting that is currently taking place in Zimbabwe at the present moment. I chair the Public Accounts Committee of Parliament. I've never seen such massive looting done directly from Treasury, from the Ministry of Finance. The Minister of Finance is traditionally a gatekeeper. And when you have a situation where the gatekeeper becomes the gatecrasher, you have a problem. In some of the figures, $2.7 billion stolen in 2017. And in 2017, on one day alone, the 27th of December, 2017, $1.5 billion was stolen directly from Treasury. I mean, for Christ's sake, who steals on Christmas Day? 2018, $3.5 billion was stolen. Then you have what they've been stealing from the Reserve Bank, the US dollar, what they've been stealing through Command Agriculture, what they've been stealing through fuel, what they've been stealing through procurement, what they've been stealing through subsidies. It's a dog's breakfast, and one which not many dogs would touch. Look at the way they're stripping commodities, minerals, and so forth. Kudata Gwire and Sakunda now have their hands in virtually every sector of our commodities, whether it's platinum, whether it's gold, whether it's chrome, whether it's diamonds. Their ugly hands are there. And Emmerson Mnangagwa is right at the center of this. They've taken over the entire transportation or public transportation of Zimbabwe. The monopoly has been given to ZUPCO, the Zimbabwe United Passenger Omnibus company. Who is controlling that? It's actually Emmerson Mnangagwa and Kudasi company, Landela Ventures. So they've got their ugly hands in every facet of the economy. And I don't think there's any incentive for them to dialogue and to negotiate. As Michelle Wong wrote in relation to Kenya, it's their time to eat. And when they are eating, I don't think they would want to depart from the political scene. A third disincentive for departure is the elite rupture inside, ZANU-PF itself. So apart from the state being an arena of accumulation, it's also an arena for safety. As long as you are president, you can control the armed section of the state for your own security. No one is going to come to your door to prosecute you. So holding on to power, fragile and slippery as it is, it becomes a source of personal security, family security, tribal, security. So, in my respectful submission, the drivers of change in Zimbabwe, which I'll talk about, are at the present moment outweighed by the regime retention agenda, or more appropriately, the regime survival agenda, and that doesn't bode well for Zimbabwe. What are the drivers for change, and how do we make the drivers for change, for transformation, for dialogue? How do we make them outweigh the regime survival or regime change agenda? How do we get to a stage where we can actually dialogue? The drivers for change are, number one, the complete economic mismanagement by this regime. Look at the total mismanagement of monetary policy and the foreign exchange regime. They introduced the auction rate a few weeks ago, but the auction rate itself is increasing exponentially, simply because you can't control a product that you don't have, and we're not producing. There's no productivity. So yesterday's auction rate, it was 1:8. The black market rate is 1:105. In a few weeks' time, the auction rate will be on 1:105, and the parallel rate will keep on growing faster than the auction rate. The source of all Zimbabwe's economic stability is, of course, lack of fiscal discipline and lack of fiscal consolidation. While nominally they appear to have surpluses, the deficit is being monetized and hidden through the Reserve Bank, which has started printing money and is increasing a broad money supply. Only a week ago, they signed an agreement, a global compensation fund agreement with the erstwhile farmers of US $3.5 billion. That has not been brought to Parliament. That has not been approved by Parliament, but that will impose serious fiscal obligations on the Republic of Zimbabwe, as half of that amount has to be paid by within 12 months. Within 12 months from now. The crisis is also increased, has also come at a cost. They've had to put soldiers on the streets. They've had to cancel the leave of every policeman, every CIO, every soldier. That has come at a cost. They've had to increase the salaries of civil servants. And so the budget deficit is looming. And as all of us know, it is not the budget deficit per se which is a problem. It's how they monetize the budget deficit, how they cover the war. And if you cover the war through creative extra-legal means, like the printing of money, you've got a problem. So in short, economic mismanagement is a driver for change. Corruption itself is a driver of change. Our people are very, very angry. Number three is the violence on our people. Recently, we had those three girls, Netsai Marova, Joanna Mamombe, Cecilia Chimbiri. Those girls were sexually, abused. We had young Mucheiwa in Bulawayo, again, viciously assaulted and sexually abused. We've got journalists that are in hiding. We've got complete capture of state institutions. I'm a practicing lawyer. Going to court is a nightmare because the formalities, because appearing in court is just a formality. You know the outcome, and it's brazen, and they don't care. So in my submission, there is an obligation on the citizen, including the MDC Alliance, of keeping on pressure against the regime is permitted in terms of Section 59 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe, with all the attendant risks, with all the attendant dangers. So 31 July was fantastic. Some will argue that it flopped. I would submit that it didn't, because the state was stretched. The stretch was exposed, and they failed to meet the test. You also have impending constitutional amendments. Emerson is amending the constitution to consolidate his own hold on power and to recreate an imperial president. So the constitutional project is another one that is creating an incentive for change, because the citizen is very unhappy with the constitutional amendments. So there's an obligation on the citizen to keep on pumping the pressure. There's an obligation on the MDC Alliance to actually provide the requisite leadership. But most importantly, there's an obligation on every Zimbabwean of understanding that he or she has an obligation to act. The next critical issue is that even if we put pressure, there has to be external agency on the Zimbabwean crisis. There has to be external a referee. So it is going to be very critical for the region to act. It is going to be very critical for Cyril Ramaphosa to act. And I think it's disappointing at the present moment that we haven't seen the leadership that we expect of Cyril Ramaphosa. We haven't seen SADC behaving and acting in the same way that other regional bodies, in particular the West African regional body, has been acting. And so SADC itself has become a hotspot of nasty characters. Take John Pombe Magufuli in Tanzania. Take Edgar Chagwa Lungu in Zambia. Take Filipe Nyusi in Mozambique, and our very own Emerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa. So there is an obligation on SADC. There is an obligation on international law to provide not just a deterrence to the kind of fascist madness that is taking place in Zimbabwe, but also the kind of incentives that are necessary to ensure that there is order in Zimbabwe, there is stability. And my hope is that with the world paying attention closely on Zimbabwe as it is at the present moment, that the UN, and in particular the UN Security Council, may take notice. So my submission is that the primary obligation of obtaining the change we need lies on Zimbabwe. But Zimbabweans alone, without the agency and external refereeing of the regional community, it won't be enough. In 2007, 2008, we got both. So a national transitional mechanism is something that we support, but it must be based on the agenda of reform, on the agenda of transformation. And we must avoid the mistakes we made in 2007, 2008, when we created the government of national unity by focusing and creating an agreement that was essentially a peace agreement, a peace truce to stop the violence and the killings of 2008. This time around, we are wiser. We have learned from our mistake. We must actually craft an agreement that focuses on real reform. And real reform must start with how do we deal with the security question in Zimbabwe? How do we ensure that the military go back to the barrack? How do we ensure that the military comply with Section 205 of the Constitution and respect an elected civilian order? Secondly, how do we deal with the scourge of state capture? In my respectful view, corruption has become such a key issue in the Zimbabwean discourse that to move forward, you have to put it high up on the agenda of any meaningful discussion on reform, on transformation. So after the security question, after the military question, you have to have discussions on security, on corruption, because corruption and the military sector are inextricably linked. You'll find the same characters, the same cabal involved in both sides of the coin. Then, of course, we need political reform. we need constitutional reform, we need legislative reform, and perhaps most importantly, how do we recover and rehabilitate the economy? Because the ordinary citizen out there is suffering. 95% of Zimbabweans are unemployed. 7 million Zimbabweans are food vulnerable. 5 million Zimbabweans have to receive international humanitarian assistance. 79% of Zimbabweans are living in extreme poverty, surviving on less than US 35 cents a day, what we here in Zimbabwe call sauna. So then, of course, you have got the crisis, the COVID pandemic, which has been seriously been mishandled and mismanaged by this regime. So we have a number of issues that need address. But in my opinion, we are still far, because you've got a group of deranged individuals who are oblivious to the plight of Zimbabweans, who are concerned with two things and two things alone: A, the power retention agenda, and 2, state capture or corruption. And the head boy of that group is Emmerson Mnangagwa. I'll stop here for now.
Thank you very much. You've touched on quite a few issues, and I can see that the chat room is quite busy. There are quite a lot of questions from people. So I'll ask some. The first one is from T. Dodlo, who says, military has always been an extension of ZANU-PF, and I would actually want to also add a question to his observation, saying that so what do you propose to do in terms of bringing the military to the table? Do you think the military should be brought to the table, since there is such a significant player in this all, in this saga?
Well, I think it's a dangerous precedent to actually bring the military on the table. I think it's a dangerous precedent. It's an unconstitutional precedent, and I think it must be avoided. But there must be dialogue. There must be dialogue that takes care of military concerns and the military issues. In 2008, in April 2008, after the MDC had won that election, and Morgan Tsvangirai had beaten President Robert Mugabe, the military sent envoys to talk to Morgan Tsvangirai. And there were about 6 key issues that they raised with the MDC at the time. The first one was that were concerns about transitional justice. Won't a future government prosecute us for human rights abuses that we have made to commit in the past? And we gave an assurance on an open, transparent program of transitional justice. The second question was, will a future government not dispossess them of the proceeds of their illicit or legal business activities? The third question was, will a future government not dispossess them of their land and not reverse the land question? And of course, the answer is obvious. No one wants to reverse the land question, and I don't think it's possible to reverse the land reform program anyway. The fourth or fifth question was whether those of them who wanted to leave the country would be allowed to leave the country. And of course, there's freedom of movement in Zimbabwe. The next question were their own conditions of services, decent salaries, and so forth. Again, obvious question. Next question was their pensions. They wanted a guarantee on their pensions, that their pensions would not be affected. Again, not a problem. The last question was whether they will be allowed to participate in spheres of the economy, including joining the civil service should they quit the military. So my submission is that their concerns must be attended to. They're an important stakeholder. But I believe strongly that by and large, the majority of the military will accept the dictates of the constitution. But you still have a few, and the few are largely people in the military who participated in the liberation struggle, who feel that this is our thing, and to use the local language, chinu chedu, And that generation, the liberation generation, is a challenge, not just in the military, but in the length and the breadth of Zimbabwe, because it's a generation that is still fighting a war that finished 40 years ago. It is a generation that is driven by entitlement. It is a generation that is driven by impunity. It is a generation that is driven by an extractive mindset. It is a generation that is driven by a messianic mindset. We liberated you. We are your own Jesus. So nothing, there's no Zimbabwe without us. So it's a challenge that we have to face. It's a challenge that South Africans will face. It's a challenge that Mozambicans are facing. It's a challenge that Angolans are facing. It's a challenge that every country in Africa which has gone through a physical liberation struggle is facing.
What can you say about this?
Yeah, firstly, I think the attacks on President Chamisa are unfair. He just lost his mother, and we all know what it means, what mothers mean to us. He also just lost his uncle, a week ago. So I think that let's respect him and allow him to mourn his dearly beloved, mother, who sacrificed a lot for him to go to school. The issue of, again, there's also a very unfair attack on the role of the MDC. One of the ironies, Violet, is that if you look at the one simple organization which is taking the brunt of the insanity of Emmerson Mnangagwa, it's actually the MDC Alliance. We have had a strange court judgment handed against us in the middle of a COVID pandemic. We've had our head office taken over by the military in the middle of the night. We have had our members disproportionately. If you look at everyone who has been abducted, tortured, raped, it's disproportionate by far, by an overall, by far. They are members of the MDC. On Friday, Saturday, we're in court. Fadzai area, our spokesperson, was in court together with some of our members. Our Secretary General is in court. I'm in court. Literally everyone is in court. Our youth leaders, each one of them right now is either in hiding or in prison or out on bail. Kurawone, for instance, in Masvingo. So we've taken the brand, but we will lead, and we will lead from the front. So we've got an important role to play. I, however, emphasized that every Zimbabwean must play his role. Every Zimbabwean must play a role. It's now beyond a single, organization because of the brutality of the regime, the ubiquitousness of the regime. Look at what we saw on the 31st of July, 2020. There were basically policemen and soldiers literally in every street of Zimbabwe, without exception, whether you went to Chireds, whether you went to Odds, whether you went to Nyazura, to Todito, to Chendambuya Tunkai, and so forth. So we need to increase the cost of the dictatorship, and every Zimbabwean citizen has an obligation to play his or her part, just like we did during the liberation struggle.
So, Mr. Miti, just a final question before I move on to the discussions and open the line so that our viewers can also participate, because I can see a lot of people saying we want to contribute, and I'm sure they'll be able to ask some of the questions that they have for you. Bottom line, what settlement is required, and what should the opposition do to mount an effective challenge to the current regime? Briefly, please.
Well, the settlement is very clear. We wrote about that in our reload, document. ZANU-PF needs genuinely to come to the table. In 2008, they didn't come genuinely to the table. 2, there must be an agreed set of reforms. I've spoken about that. 3, there must be external referee. There must be a mutually agreed mediator, who at this present moment, I don't think it will be a Zimbabwean, an eminent, African, and there are many of them, including President Papa Obasanjo. 4, there must be an implementing mechanism, the National Transitional Authority, as we call it. 5, there must be an agreement on the duration of the implementation of the reform agenda. Lastly, there must be a free and fair election to restore the country to legitimacy. So it's a simple, straightforward roadmap.